Today I woke up, did my calisthenics, took my Bergamasco Shepherd on a walk down the riverside, sold countless shares of various cryptocurrencies at a significant deficit in a premeditated attempt to crash the market, and decided it had been too long and it was time to make some strangers angry online again. Okay, some of that isn't true. I decided to make people angry weeks ago. To be precise, I decided to make people angry online approximately 60% of the way into the Advance Wars 1 campaign of recent remake, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, when I realised that I wasn't having fun. I briefly flirted with Advance Wars many years ago when I was about 14 years old and played it for the first time via legal and ethical means. Shortly after discovering that I really liked Fire Emblem through legal and ethical means. Advance Wars, knowing that I was a minor, should never have flirted back, but it did. It made me think it was cool and good. And now it must pay its penance. Either I didn't get far enough in Advance Wars to see the flaws, or my critical brain just hadn't fully developed yet, because playing these games back via the aforementioned 2023 remake, I've realised that, I'm sorry, I think these games are kinda not very good. Advance Wars has a lot of goodwill. As an oft-neglected Nintendo series with some really cool aesthetics and general vibes that could serve as a great modern alternative to the increasingly gacha-fied VTuber-infested Fire Emblem, they were made by the same studio, if you didn't know, a lot of people are rooting for it. They want to see it back, they want to see it succeed, and you know what? I am one of these people. In concept, I like Advance Wars a lot, but I think 1 and 2 are kinda mid. And I make this video because playing them back in 2023, I've been feeling left quite disappointed and unfulfilled. I can honestly say I don't like being negative in videos like this, and I generally try and avoid it, but I haven't felt this compelled to say something like this in a long time. I have a lot I want to get off my chest, and once I'm finished shaving my nipple hair, I also want to talk about why I think the original 2 Advance Wars games don't hold up that well, and how the response to them shines a pretty harsh light on reviewers and the modern game journalism industry as a whole. Before we get down and dirty about this, there's something I want to be upfront about. The remake is not the problem. A lot of people on YouTube have gotten far too comfortable with shitting all over the hard work of people significantly more talented, passionate, and frankly interesting than them. Maybe 15 years or so ago there was some humorous merit in that because the internet, and specifically YouTube, was still a pretty niche thing that most industry figures and creators of actual media weren't on. Nowadays, people see you publicising the supposed failure of their hard work, and if it's the property of a scummy ass company like Blizzard or Ubisoft, then fuck it, go get them. But if it's the product of a smaller, earnest team who put genuine love into what they make, even if you don't like it, I don't know, maybe put the backwards snapback and clickbait arrows and general inability to form grammatically coherent sentences aside for a moment and just let it be. I want to say that WayForward, the studio who made Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, are awesome. None of the things they have done with this as a remake are even remotely the problem. In fact, they're pretty much the only thing about it that I really like. The UI and menus are colourful and sleek and gorgeous, the character models and animations are full of life and personality, and the remixed music is really great too. I don't know why the battle theme for retired old pilot Sensei is this super jazzy salsa kind of thing, but it goes so hard, I'm not complaining. I also don't know why he's called Sensei, but he has like a really American accent. Copter Command! I like everything WayForward have done with this as a package. All the extra stuff like the gallery and the map creator are awesome too. No, I don't love the vomit green colour of the grass and in-game textures, but I find that people who complain about a remake's visuals are often amongst the most insufferable people in the world, and I don't want to be lumped in with them, so I'll get over it. We've got bigger fish to fry. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp is a very faithful remake of the original 2 Advance Wars games, and that's where the problem lies, because I think these two games are very fundamentally flawed. Let's start with the obvious. The AI is as dumb as a box of rocks. I played on Classic, the harder of the two difficulties, and have found that the AI never reacts to you having a unit nearing an objective. You can have an infantry unit on literally the space next to the HQ you need to capture to win the match, and they still send their units off to fight your other guys halfway across the map. Only when you begin the active process of capturing an objective does that unit become a target, which is very exploitable because you can just send infantry and mech units in to capture an objective as a decoy, knowing they'll die, and then send all your tanks and other guys around the ensuing chaos to win the game. The enemy AI will also frequently attack your units with suboptimal units. Here is some footage of my opponent attacking my battlecopter with both a tank and a recon unit two units which are very poorly matched up against battlecopters, taking more damage than they dealt to me in the first place on the counter-attack, and then sending in an anti-air unit which would have one-shot it from full health earlier and was in range the whole time after letting the two previous units take completely unnecessary damage. In this match, my opponent, despite having held multiple bases to manufacture additional units throughout the game, including the seaport that you're seeing right now, elects to spend practically the whole match creating submarines, which can only attack other naval units, and in their case, can only be placed in a body of water on the opposite side of the map to mine. I only have very few naval units anyway, but even if I had built up quite a lot, these submarines would not be able to do anything about them. They're on the other side of the map. These submarines cannot attack anything that is currently relevant in this battle, or likely to be relevant at any point. They are quite literally useless. I am in the middle of the map right now, completing the objective, and they continue to make more submarines. It's all submarines and landers full of units. They continue not to unload on me. I literally won this match because of this. Look at that. That is an inordinate amount of submarines. Advance Wars does not share many of the RPG elements of Fire Emblem. Instead, it hunkers down on the strategy aspect. Yet, you rarely ever win a match in Advance Wars because of careful planning and smart strategy. Mostly, you win because the CPU was being fucking stupid. And because of this, wins, no matter how long they took, rarely feel particularly satisfying. To anyone experiencing anxiety at the prospect of an AI uprising endangering the entire world, play some Advance Wars. It'll fix you right up. I've saved my best piece of footage for last. How did I win the match when my opponent attacked my battlecopter with two units that are weak against it before then sending in the one that one-shots it after? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you don't know how Advance Wars works, in most battles you have two win conditions. You can win via destroying all the enemy units, or you can win via capturing the enemy HQ. Capturing an HQ or a city requires you to plant a unit on that tile and spend a turn or two capturing it instead of doing anything else like attacking or moving. It takes 20 points to capture more or less anything in the game, and when you capture something, you subtract the HP of the unit doing the capturing from that 20 points. Every unit starts with a default of 10 HP, so it should take 2 turns for a unit at full health to capture something. We clear? In this clip, I have my infantry unit initiate the process of capturing the objective needed to win the battle. I do this pretty much ready to give up. I'm literally just thinking about conceding the match right now, because at the end of my turn, with all my units having attacked, there is still an enemy tank literally directly below it, and another enemy infantry unit on the space directly to its right. Enemy reinforcements are coming in pretty soon. I'm pretty outgunned. All the enemy has to do is attack the infantry unit this turn with either of these units that are standing directly adjacent to it, which would lower my HP, thus lowering the amount of progress I make in capturing the objective so that I don't fully finish capturing it next turn, which would at least buy the opponent an extra turn, but more likely win them the whole match, as they're likely to be able to have all their forces rush in and overwhelm me. And then, I shit you not, the tank just runs away to an empty space on the map and does nothing, and the infantry unit directly next to me attempts to capture the city on the tile next to the objective with 1 health left.
Well now, this should be fun to mess with.
I should not have won this. I was literally ready to yield the previous turn. When this happened, my jaw was agape. I could not believe that I actually won. And I didn't win because of my superior planning or strategy or anything. I literally won because the enemy AI refused to win. For a game that, on its harder difficulty, frequently elects to go out of its way to attack your battlecopters with extremely suboptimal units that get totally destroyed on the counterattack, they surely just sit there and decide to be as passive as possible, huh? And yet, somehow, despite the AI being this unintelligent, battles in Advance Wars, especially in the latter halves of both games, managed to go on for absolutely ages. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Advance Wars has made me appreciate Fire Emblem so much. Now, I hate anime culture and Fire Emblem fans as much as, if not more, than anyone who frequently uses Twitter.com should ever admit to, but goddamn man, Fire Emblem understands the concept of pacing. I'd say the average length of its chapters never really go above more than an hour or so. It has a pretty clean curve and generally manages to prevent from getting boring. It is insane how quickly Advance Wars mission length goes completely off the rails. It starts off on a pretty sensible Fire Emblem style curve, and then for about the last third or so it just completely spirals out of control. This shit goes from feeling like Fire Emblem to feeling like Civilization real quick, and it is not a good fit. It feels laborious and grindy. Even when it's clear that you have a match well in hand, you have to keep slogging through hours and hours of attrition warfare to power a unit through to the objective, especially in missions where both armies have bases and are constantly spawning new units every turn. Day 15! Give it up for Day 15! The final boss of Advance Wars 1, I say without a word of exaggeration, took me 5 hours. A final boss that, like, basically doesn't have a boss theme, by the way. Like, I know the music in each stage is dependent on whose turn it is, and every character has their own theme that plays during their turn, but, like, I don't know, man, it's the final boss. You could have done anything differently for this? Super underwhelming to get to the final boss, and it's just, like, the same track you've been listening to for the past 20 hours in normal battles now. Like, imagine fighting Lance at the end of Pokemon Gold and Silver, and it's just a wild battle theme. That is honestly kind of what this feels like. This 5-hour time was without any resets, by the way. I don't think I was playing particularly badly. I mean, I'm no speedrunner, but I was only playing the game in the way that made sense to me, and every video I found online of people playing the same battle also goes on for multiple hours. The battle before that took me 3 hours. The last few battles of Advance Wars 2 clock in at about the same amount. Guys, you've only got so much time on this beautiful green planet, okay? You can't spend it all going through the motions slogging through Advance Wars. You gotta get out there and touch some grass. Especially you, Fire Emblem fans. You could make the argument that this length is intentional and part of Advance Wars' design identity, but again, it doesn't work because of just how much it escalates. And there's no checkpoint system of any kind, no meaningful way to load saves mid-battle, which I don't necessarily think would be a good fix either, because then the game would be completely trivialized. Again, fundamentally flawed. No one change fixes this. And when it bears so many similarities to Fire Emblem, I don't think you can be surprised that that also invites some comparisons and expectations. It doesn't work for this kind of game. It is slow and sluggish and mind-numbing. I promise you guys, this isn't part of a personal vendetta against this game. I've played Fire Emblem, Civilization, Life Sims, card games, tons of slow stuff of different breeds. Length has never been a problem for me. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp does have a fast forward feature that allows you to speed up the animations of your enemy turns, and it says a lot that even whilst holding the right shoulder button to enable it to such an extent that my index finger on my right hand started to hurt, these battles still took me upwards of 3 hours. The fast forward feature, whilst a nice gesture, does also somewhat unfortunately enable yet another problem with the game, and that's camera angles. When a unit attacks you, quite often the camera makes no effort to pan over to that unit or simply doesn't zoom in on said unit enough. Basically, the camera is not accentuating the unit you're being attacked by enough, and especially when you're using the fast forward feature, which you will be all the time, this can lead to some serious confusion, especially for new players. I cannot tell you the amount of times starting out that I could have swore I'd been attacked by an artillery unit that had just moved and attacked in the same turn because one had moved, and then I'd been attacked by a tank or something with a similar enough model during the battle animation, and then the camera had never panned over to it or highlighted it well enough. And hey, damn, that's a lot of unit names I've been throwing out already, huh? Yeah, Advance Wars is like rock, paper, scissors if there were 8 choices, and 5 of those 8 choices only interacted specifically with 4 of those other choices, and the remaining choices had extremely niche and specific interactions with everything else, and also there were terrain bonuses and special powers and over 50% of the game's maps threw this annoying ass fucking fog of war at you that further slowed the game game's pace to a halt, and also felt like it eliminated a lot of the strategy, and instead just had you fucking firing blindly into the dark for half an hour trying to find the bastard-ass rocket unit that's been pounding on you from 6 spaces away the whole time. Advance Wars is surprisingly complicated. It has a lot of unit types to keep track of. Some might say too many. It's me, I am Sam. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think some units, like the cruiser and missile units, are completely redundant. The missile unit just does what the rocket unit does, but specifically on flying units, which feels way too specific to ever be worth the obscene amount of money it costs to make them via a base, and for them to ever really be useful in the maps that just give you them by default. Most of the time they chug along behind the rest of your army 2 spaces at a time and are never able to even remotely enter the space of the flying units they're supposed to counter. I love it when the optimal strategy is to just sit and wait for the AI to foolishly move right into my unit's attack range. Cruisers are... well, I struggle to see what their purpose really is aside from killing subs, which is a purpose you could easily just leave on other subs or pile onto battleships in exchange for another weakness. They're supposed to be able to carry transport copters across sea, which in turn will be carrying a unit of their own. But what the hell is the point of strapping a flying unit to a boat, which is much more at risk of getting destroyed from out of nowhere and has basically the exact same movement as the transport copter? The copter can fly. It's not exactly like water's a problem for it. In this map here, you're given a cruiser and start with a transport copter that's on 2 health and already right in the midst of enemy territory for some reason, and this little interaction just feels useless. You might as well just use the copter, or better yet, just get to the objective on foot. It's not exactly a large map. Aside from that, the cruiser has one purpose in this whole mission: kill the sole enemy sub. You do that, and then the cruiser just fucking sits there for the rest of the game. Even in a map seemingly designed to make use of it, it just sits there, turn after turn, doing nothing, whilst the rest of your units actually have things to interact with. This map is a perfect encapsulation of the redundancy of the cruiser. It's like even the devs are saying, yeah, we don't know what the fuck to do with this thing either. Advance Wars is complicated, but it never justifies that convolutedness by feeling particularly deep. This unit can attack infantry, subs, and planes, but it can't attack copters or ships. What the hell do all these niche unit-to-unit interactions that just blend into each other even mean, when you can basically win every battle, incredibly slowly, by just abusing the god-awful AI, understanding that they are programmed to flee with units that are low on health, even if simply attacking with one of them would literally win them the game, understanding that they almost always attack anything capturing an objective otherwise, understanding that they practically always move into your attack range and attack first, even if they know the outcome won't be good for them. What's the point in learning 9,568 different attack interactions when I can just win the game by abusing one of these things? Or by accident? Hey, I know what you're thinking right now. Fudj, isn't most of your video content on hard drive now? Why are you blessing us with this life-changing piece of precious discourse on your old channel? And good question, and very well worded if I may say so myself. While it is true that I am the current beaming face of the hard drive YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to here, and see basically all the new videos I've done for the past 6 months here, including the biggest project I've ever worked on in the entirety of my YouTube career, a ranking of every North American N64 game ever made here, I felt this video was perhaps slightly too genuinely critical and earnestly analytical in its intention to belong on hard drive, which you can subscribe to here. This is of course not to say the stuff I'm doing over there hasn't been earnest. In my short time working with that channel as my main base of operations, I've already penned jape-laced reviews of the likes of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and Elden Ring, gotten to the bottom of what happened to Nintendo's forgotten Donkey Kong Jr., and even assessed the odds of an ordinary, real-life human surviving in the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time's version of Hyrule. Word on the street is that another little doozy's getting dropped in the latest Zelda game there pretty soon. If you like what you're seeing right now, don't miss it. You can subscribe, here. Late in Advance Wars 1, when former enemy officer Eagle and literal child protagonist Andy are celebrating a victory, Eagle tells Andy they should spar again sometime. Spar? What the fuck do you mean, spar? When a helicopter bursts into flames and explodes with screaming men inside it, is he aware of what's happening? He does realise what war is and what it entails, right? Why is he suggesting sparring with the game's child protagonist as if sending men to their deaths in large-scale armed combat is a fucking anime training montage? Those are people with guns and explosives, Eagle, you fucking freak! The world of Advance Wars is canonically called War's World. Clearly, the biggest loser in this video is me, who has written up this entirely too lengthy diatribe about a video game where anime teens wage literal war against each other in a place called fucking War's World. Genuinely, I cannot stop thinking about the ramifications of a place called War's World that seems to exist for the sole purpose of being a place where wars happen. All I know is I could never be caught off guard if I lived in a place called Lactose Land and a man showed up in a Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning Mark II fighter jet looking for cheese. By the way, what's the deal with the voice acting? Like, it's fine, don't get me wrong, but why are characters only ever saying 30 to 40% of what's on screen at most? I understand having a budget or time constraints, but like, none of the VOs who got into their studios or whatever had the time at any point to just read all of the dialogue in any given text box. This isn't like a Fire Emblem situation where they're using grunts or noises to actively convey the character's emotions consistently, because every character has like 2 noises max, and the lines and words that they do choose to read out I just find really weird. I don't know how else to describe it, you'd have to see it for yourself. It's just really weird what they did and did not record. The plot sucks, by the way. I know that the story is hardly the point of these games, but I just wanted to say it. I played through the entirety of Advance Wars 1 and I genuinely still don't know what happened. Like, there was kind of a subplot about like a clone of Andy going around and like starting wars in other countries, and all the people who are from those other countries think that that was actually Andy, and that's where they're fighting. Yeah, it's a mess. 20 years old, so, you know, whatever, just while I'm here. In my mind, it's clear that Advance Wars 1 and 2 simply do not hold up very well. They were likely pretty good for the time when they were released. I'm sure Advance Wars was fun in 2001? Yeah, it was probably fun in 2001. But through everything I've shown you today, from AI to pacing to sheer mechanical overload, I should hope that you're probably sat there thinking, yeah, this all makes sense. It doesn't look like Advance Wars has aged very well. But apparently, it would appear that I am somewhat alone in thinking this. On release, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp was showered with praise by just about every outlet going. An 8 out of 10 from IGN, a 9 out of 10 for Nintendo Life, with particular praise given to its perfectly paced skirmishes, 4 out of 5 stars from Eurogamer. I've read all of these reviews. Most of the praise goes to the fundamentals of Advance Wars campaigns themselves, and not all the presentational flourishes given to the package by WayForward's, again, splendid work on them. And I just have to wonder, did we play the same game? Playing Advance Wars 1 and 2 in the modern day, I think, was largely very unfun. In a time where the few strategy RPGs that exist have broken their battles down into relatively manageable encounters of about 30 to 90 minutes, and the ones that don't, whilst also putting less emphasis on RPG elements like Advance Wars are called real-time strategy games, Advance Wars blurs the lines in the worst and most unexpected ways. Starting off with battles that take about 10 to 20 minutes and then ballooning into these absurd 4-hour endurance tests where the whole thing can fall apart and you can lose an hour in because you positioned 1 or 2 units ever so slightly wrong. Or you can know that you've won 2 hours in but have to push on through another 2 because the enemy has bases that they're spawning tons of new units in through every turn, and are stopping you from realistically being able to sneak any unit onto the objective without taking care of all of them. And if neither of these things happen, maybe they just give you the win by accident. I won't say that planning and strategy never paid off, but one of the 3 previous scenarios was far more frequent. All the while, I didn't feel that my time was being respected. The game looks, feels, and sounds incredibly repetitious, and having to replay one of these monolithic chapters again from the very start, which on classic mode you'll likely have to do a lot because AI be damned, there is sometimes, somewhat randomly, very little margin for error in these battles, is brutal. I struggle to see how a game where scenarios like this can happen, and did happen frequently, I just didn't capture footage of them, can be hailed as some kind of strategy masterpiece. But, and maybe this was somewhat enabled by what a time sink the game is, what occurs to me is how broken modern game journalism is. And I don't just say this because there's a bunch of reviewers that I disagree with. If anything, I empathise with them. Modern game journalism is a fucking rat race. There are tons of stories out there of reviewers having to speed through games to get them finished so they can publish a review as fast as possible whilst said game is still relevant and get as many clicks on their site or video or whatever. I mean, isn't it kind of insane that the review in progress has even become a thing? Often people still don't even have time to finish the game or even get halfway through before they feel obligated to publish their review. Here's a question. Have you ever heard a Pokemon review from a large outlet talk about the way they continually handicap competitive play with ludicrous features like the 20-minute battle timer in Sword and Shield? Have they ever talked about EV or IV training? Has a review of a Smash Bros game ever talked about how its mechanics like brawls, tripping and lack of legal stages or Smash Ultimate's buffer systems hinder competitive play? play? What about the removal of Mario 64's backwards long jump in Super Mario 3D All-Stars, basically killing off any chance of that port being viable for a speedrun? This stuff really does matter in my opinion, but it's not surface level. It takes a significant amount of time with a game and a really solid grasp of the game's community at large to understand these things and why they matter. An amount of time that the modern game journalist is just not really afforded, because then they need to move on to the next thing. I've spoken to people in the industry who have said that they hesitate to give particularly low scores to games that they were given review codes for because they don't want to strain their relationship with that publisher. And of course they don't. You want to keep getting codes, you want to keep getting there first with everyone else, so even if you don't love a game you got a code for, you ease up a little bit, you leave some of the criticisms out. These people admit that this is a problem, by the way. This is not the fault of the reviewer. At the risk of suddenly making this video a bit depressing, this is the sad state of our fucked up and broken modern games journalism. This is what happens when we all have to make a profit to survive. These are the consequences of...
Say the line, Bart!
late stage capitalism. It is my belief that it is the unfortunate truth that the modern big outlet game review is good for really one thing, and that's finding out whether the game works. If it's a buggy, broken mess, then it gets below a 7. If it works and runs well enough, it gets 7 or above, regardless of the deeper systems of the game, regardless of the minutiae at play that takes several more hours to sink your teeth into. If it's a well-presented game that's fun enough for a few hours of casual play, well, that's that. Rarely, if ever, do they delve into what makes these games tick. I say all this because, having played over 50 hours of Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, there is just no way none of these reviewers run into AI like what I've shown you today if they were able to play the game for any significant amount of time. It is ever present. There were so many more moments like this that I didn't get footage of. These games, in the modern day, fall apart after long enough with them. They are fun at first. The nostalgia hits you like a wave, the missions are a sensible length, but then the AI starts just giving you the win, and yet still the missions go on for hours and the redundancy of so many units and mechanics begins to wear on you. Perhaps it's wrong to say that these games aren't good, but I don't think it's inaccurate to suggest that they actually haven't aged well and they don't hold up by modern standards. I'm shocked that seemingly not a single reviewer feels the same way. But I want to reiterate that what I've talked about here is not the fault of any individual reviewer or journalist. We are all cogs in the machine. I think this is just a solid argument in favour of the independents on YouTube, the video essayists as much as I love bashing on them, the solo reviewers who don't have to worry about deadlines and time frames and publisher relations, people who pick and choose the games they evaluate and get to really spend time with them, who get to dive into stuff beyond the surface level. So forget wars, world, fellow YouTubers. Our friends in journalism are being held captive by enemy algorithms and executives. Load up with all the lengthy metaphors and real-life diatribes you can find and get ready to pick up the slack. The real war is against public enterprise.